Okay, we're going to start the first shiur on Shin Pei Beis, deal with some of the topics that are relevant for the first part of the Siman, first half of the Siman, we'll say, or a little bit less than half, and then we'll deal with the other part later. Now, the idea that's explained in Siman Shin Pei Beis, a Yid who lives together with another Jew. We explained it before. Yid who's living together with another Jew, same location, that both are in the same chatzar. One is ma'akev on the other one until they make an eruv between them. When there's a Yid living in the same chatzar, one Yid, one guy, is not ma'akev. The reason is, Alter Rebbe says, diras nochri kediras behema. That is the reason. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring it, but that's the lashon of the Torah, it's the lashon of the Lavush, that diras nochri kediras behema, and therefore it's not ma'akev. What happens if you have two Jews that live together with a guy? Then you have to get, the guy should rent out yaskir reshus, rent out the reshus for Shabbos to these Jews, and then these Jews could be ma'arev between themselves. They still have to be ma'arev between themselves. The first have to be schiras reshus from the guy. That doesn't mean that the guy's dira suddenly switched from being a diras behema to being a diras adam. That's not the reason. The Alter Rebbe clearly tells you right away. It's simple. The Chachamim were worried that the Yid is going to learn from the guy what to do. When the Yid is alone, it's not shchiach that the Yid is going to live together with a guy. Why? Because nachrim chashudim al shvichas damim, the goyim have a chashash, the shefech damim, therefore one Yid is going to be living with one guy in the same chatzar. He has a chashash shema yargenu, it's not common. Therefore the Chachamim did not feel a need to be mesaken. But when you have two Yidden, so then they are already stronger than the one guy, and they're not worried about getting killed, and therefore they're going to continue living there. They're going to learn from his actions, and therefore Chachamim wanted to prevent a situation that the Yid is going to learn from the guy's actions, and they tried to make it complicated for the Jews to live with the goyim in the same location, and therefore they said that you have to do schiras reshus. Once you do schiras reshus, the guy is going to think it's some kind of witchcraft. He's not going to want to do it. You're not going to be able to carry. You're going to move out. And that is the goal. Now, for a lot of people live in the same house, then even though they are all no longer scared from the guy, there's no need for a schiras reshus, but we go based on the amount of houses. Is one house, if it's one house of the Yidden and one house of the guy, Chachamim were not geyser in such a scenario, but if there's more than one house of Yidden, even if these houses are made in such a way, the relationship between them is in such a way that there is no chiyuv on them to be ma'arif. For example, they're all the children who are receiving money for food from their parents. Being that they don't have to do an eruv, they also don't have to do schiras reshus if it's all in the same house. But if they're in separate houses, you also don't have to do schiras reshus. And for whatever reason, the Chachamim were not geyser in these scenarios that you're going to learn from the guy. That is the opening statement of the Shulchan Aruch. Let's go a little bit into the detail on this specific topic, that the reason why you have to be seicher reshus from a guy is that you should not learn from his actions. Now, this idea that you're not supposed to do certain interactions with the guy because you're going to learn from what he does is also written in Shulchan Aruch, in Yeridea, in the beginning of the halachas of Ribis, Siman Kuf Nun Tes. It says over there, Shulchan Aruch says, Midiraisa, you're allowed to lend to a guy. You're allowed to mutter, to lend to a guy with Ribis. By the way, the Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Ribis Sifayin Hey writes mitzvah, l'halvis, l'nachri beribis. However, Chachamim were oyser to lend money to a guy beribis. V'ho'idna mutter. Today it's mutter, the Shulchan Aruch says, and the Ramos says b'chol inyan. Now, what's the reason why the Chachamim were oyser? If you look in the Neisikelim over there in Hilchos Ribis, it'll tell you the same reason. They were choishesh that they're going to learn from the goyim's actions by hanging around with them. What's the reason that we're choishish specifically in ribis more than anything else? If you have to do actual business and actual working, then you're not going to spend too much time with them. But once you're going to realize the easy life of lending with ribis, you don't have to do any work. All you do is you give your money to somebody and the returns just come to you. So a Yid is going to be excited to do this work. So he's going to divert all his energies and all his business into this kind of business venture. So he's going to divert into the ribis business. That means he's only going to be lending to goyim. If he's only going to be lending to goyim, then he's going to learn from what they do. So that is why the Chachamim were geyser. Now just bear in mind, the Chachamim were geyser, the idea of heter iske was not yet implemented. So if a Yid wanted to lend with ribis, he didn't have a loophole to get around it. Today, maybe that's why ha'id no mutter can anzogen derech hatzachos. It's also because today people who do heter iskes, they don't have to deal with goyim. They could just use the heter iske as a catch-all for everything, and then they could deal with Yidden also. But Amol wasn't like that. Amol, you had to deal with the goyim to be able to make money off your money, and therefore we were worried that you're going to learn from them. So why ha'id no mutter in every form? The Shulchan Aruch says ha'id no mutter, and the Rama adds b'chol oifen. Yeah, because the ha'id no mutter, the Chachamim, when they were geyser, they said that if it's kedei chayav, there's no gzeira, and if it's Talmid Chacham, there's also no gzeira. So why is it today mutter? He says because the Nesikim, they also explain it. Because today we are shruyim ben ha'umois. We are living among the goyim. And in those days, that was the only form of business, one of the only forms of business that the Yidden were able to make profit of. And therefore, there's no. And therefore, and you have to deal with the goyim on everything, whether it's ribis or anything else. So there is no specific extra gzeira for ribis over anything else. So once we're mater b'chlal, megachomemker with the goyim, because that's the only way we could survive. We were also mater ribis, and we didn't say let's leave ribis as an exception. That's the only one shilmudum ma'asem. The yumudum ma'asem, they learn from the ma'asem even by selling food, by selling beer, and if not Yomudum Ma'aseyim, they're not going to be Yomudum Ma'aseyim even in the din of ribis, and therefore we're not going to make a gzeira she'ein hatzibur yochel lamid ba. Or the other reason is because today it's all kedei chayav. Why is it kedei chayav? The other reason that's explained in the poskim is because ultimately you don't know what kind of tax or what kind of thing is going to land on the Yidden's head, and you always have to have enough money to be able to do it. And if the only way to make money is through that. The Alter Rebbe B'chol doesn't bring this in Hilchos Ribis. Right away says mitzvah l'halvos to a goy beribis. Doesn't B'chol mention that it was aser, it's not aser, that today it's only mutter. He just says straight up it's a mitzvah to do it. There's a Chochmas Adam which says that even today zroy la'achmed l'ishayoshav, we don't follow the Chochmas Adam, we don't have to worry. We don't have to worry about it B'chol. Now, just by the way, if you look in Shas Tshuvas Avnei Nezer Siman Kufman Beis, he points out that this din of Yilmedu Mimaisav only applies to a Nachri who is Oved Avodah Zorah, and not by a Ger Teishav who's not Oved Avodah Zorah. We're not Choishish Yilmedu Mimaisav. Now, why am I telling you all this? Hilchos Ribis, because all this comes into a discussion in Hilchos Eirovin. Hilchos Eirovin is a Shas Tshuvas Ginas Vrodim, Klal Gimel Siman Chav Beis, that l'cha'oira in today's day and age, the whole din of schirus, min ha'nochri, should be cancelled. Why? Because today, anyways, most people are dealing business with the goyim. And therefore, the Ginas Vrodim says that you could be mekel if there are other tzdadim to be mekel, the other reasons to be mekel, you could be mekel. The Chasam Sofer took the other extreme, that you cannot be mekel even in today's day and age. We don't have the koyach to mevatel exera of Chachamim. The Beis Meir has a approach that's somewhat in between these two extremes, By the way, the people who did, in certain scenarios, people did use the Ginas Vrodim as a sniff to be matir, but in extreme situations. The Beis Meir says that Chalila, the Lashon of the Beis Meir is Chalila lehatir. But B'shas Adchak, you could do it as long as you do an Eruv. Why? He says because it's better to do an Eruv without Schirus than say we're not doing an Eruv at all, and then people might carry Be'isur. Now, the other point that's important to point out is why is a Talmid Chacham doesn't have the exception here? In Ribis, the Gzeira is there. It says Talmid Chacham is an exception to Talmid Chacham. We're not Choshesh Yomud B'Maisav. Over here, we don't say that Talmid Chacham has an exception for Schirus, even if we say that there is Schirus. Why? Because by Talmid Chacham and the Ribis is also something which used to be in the past. The Talmid Chacham is busy in learning, and therefore he's not involved in business at all. So therefore, he's not going to do these businesses. But over here, if he's living together in the same chotzer as the guy, we are choishes that he's going to learn from him because he's spending a lot of time with him. Now, why is it that we created the schirus? We said because we want them not to hang out with the guy and learn from his actions. But if it's only one Jew, then he doesn't have to because it's not shchiach. He's not going to want to live with a guy in the same chotzer because they're chashudim al shvichus damim. Does that apply today or not? There's a sicha in Likud Sichos Chelik Chaf, sicha vayishlach beis. Over there, it's talking, b'derech agav, it discusses this topic. And it's in Ha'ara 53, mainly. Over there, he brings from the Alter Rebbe here in the Chassidus, and the Rebbe brings the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe here in the Chassidus, and in Siman Chaf, in Eirech Chaim, that Nachrim are Chashudim on Shvichas Damim. Doesn't say if they ever desire. In Ha'ara 51, the Rebbe over there discusses the shittas which hold that today you don't have such an issue. But he brings the shit of the Shas Chuvas Chavas Yair. The Chavas Yair holds that it's not only Oiv de Avodah Zarah, but every Nachri is Chashud on Shvichas Damim. It's mashma that the way the Rebbe understands the Alter Rebbe is that the Alter Rebbe holds the same way. He doesn't have that exception that we mentioned before. One of the shittas, like the Avnei Nezer, that it only applies to Oiv de Avodah Zarah, but not to Nachrim Stam. And he also, the Rebbe also brings what the Chavas Yair mentions, the Chavas Yair brings the shittas that say that there is, the Chashash applies today, and the shittas that this Chashash does not apply today. That there's no more, the Goyim are not anymore Chashudim al Shvichas Damim. That's an interesting thing, it's not connected to the Shir. If you look in this third Ha'ara on this Likud Sichos, and Ha'ara 3, the Rebbe, that's the first place the Rebbe quotes as Chavas Yair. And the first the Rebbe tells you, look in Encyclopedia Talmud is Be'erkoi, and the Rebbe says, look in Chavas Yair. That for some reason it was not quoted in Encyclopedia Talmudis. So anyways, the Rebbe explains in Ha'ara 54 that these shittas which hold that today, that doesn't apply, the idea of Shvichas Damim doesn't apply, it's not because suddenly the teva of the Nachrim changed, and suddenly now, and Gevorim Besser mentioned, just they're not used to it anymore because there is governments which ensure that there is a normal system of no murders for fun. But it doesn't mean that suddenly it changes. It means the Chashash is in place. The interesting thing over here, if you look from the Rebbe's, what the Rebbe explains in these few ha'aras in the Likud Sichos, it's in Chelik Chaf Vayishlach Beis. First of all, that the Alter Rebbe holds that it's every guy, not only Oiv de Avodah Zarah. Number two, that it's relevant also b'zman hazeh. It's not in this battle. Number three, even those that hold that it is in this battle, it's only when you're talking about a normative country with normal policing and government standards, but not anywhere else. So when we roll it all back into our discussion, so the Chashash is still there. And therefore, being that the Chashash is still there to a certain degree, So therefore, we still have the chashash shel yumadu ma'aseyim. And therefore, you still need for a schirus from the nachri, so you should not be interested in living in the same chatzar as him. Now, using this, the svara, you could say that not that you should be more makel today, fakert, you should be more machmer. I didn't see it in any of the svarim, but the svara to say it should be more machmer. If you say the taka, the goyim are not today because of the situation, there's no chashash of shrichas damim, so then even 1 and 1 also yilmadu ma'aseyah. So why don't you need schilas reshus when you have 1 and 1? So there's no gzeir, certain things are not geyser or not geyser. Now, we said that if 2 Jews live in the same, back to Shulchan Aruch, if we say if 2 Jews live in 2 houses, then it's oyser. But if they're living in 1 house, 2 Jews, and then the guy in another house, the guy is not oyser, and you have to do schilas reshus. There's the chidushim of the Tzemach Tzedek on chidushim al Shas, on Perek Vav of Eirovin, which is page 89 in your book. It comes a question. Tzemach Tzedek discusses this topic and says, first of all, why are 2 Jews in 1 house not oyser? Don't create a need for a goy to be soicher reshus. The whole reason is because they're not going to be scared and they're going to learn from him. So what do I care if it's 2 Jews in 2 separate houses or 2 Jews in the same house? If we say the whole reason is Yilmadu Ma'aseyim, and if we have 2 Jews, they're going to be able to overpower him. So what do I care if the 2 Jews live in 1 house or 2 Jews live in another house? So Tzemach Tzedek says, we must say, it's Masha from the Tzemach Tzedek, that that's not the only reason, but the Chachamim attached it, something which you see also in Alter Tzedek. One of them owns 2 houses. Where would this be more common? It's a bungalow colony, and one person rents out to the guy. He's not oyser. This guy is not oyser on the rest of people. It's clearly written Alter Rebbe Sif Beis. Why? Because we say the yid who rented it out did not rent it out with the intention that he is going to become usher to carry over there. Rather, and even though if it will be a new Jew, we are machmir. Let's say if it will be 1 yid, and if it will be 1 yid owns 2 houses, 3 houses, whatever it is, and rents out to another yid, and we wouldn't require a eruv chatzeres. Over here, if it's from a guy, we don't require schiras reshus. So, where else do we have it? We mentioned it in the past in a different context. If you have a guy, which every yid that has a room full of chametz rents out a room, not everybody, but there's a concept of renting out the room where all the chametz is to the guy. So what happens if now you rent out your room to a guy and it's full of chametz? Now, does the guy have a reshus to? Does the guy have easy oyser? So it's clear from here that he's not oyser. There are some achroinim which look in Divrei Malkiel, Chelik Dalet Siman Chav Beis, and he does mention that there are people who disagree. It doesn't quote Alter Rebbe. What I'm saying is it mentions that there are people which hold that there is a shaila maybe a goy, if he soicher a room for Pesach, that he might create an isser for the rest of the people. So that's the answer that he gives over there. Being that he's not coming into the house, he's not living over there, he's not eating over there, so we don't have it. But if you Milchatchila says, when I rent a property to a goy, I did not rent it for the purpose of him making my life hard, then you don't even have to come to all this terutzim. Meikar, it's not a shaila. If I rent a house to a guy in my chatzir, I did not plan that the rental should be for the purpose of him creating a issue for me. Now, what happens if it's fakert? If you have a guy owns in the chatzir and he rents it out to a Jew, so now, and the guy still lives in the chatzir, we can't say that being that the Jew rented an apartment from the guy, that schirus helps to the whole chatzir. If there'll be a need for schiras reshus, that doesn't count that he was soicher the reshus. It's only counts for him renting his own apartment, and now he has to join the Eruv in the area. But otherwise, he still has he still has to do a specific schiras reshus from the guy in addition to the schiras of his apartment to be able to be metaltal. Huh? Everyone has to, yeah. To be metaltal in the area. The reason is very simple. The whole purpose is to chase him out of there. You shouldn't live with goyim in the same place. And the fact that you rented from a guy, he agreed to rent it to you. The whole idea of schiras reshus is to make it in such a way that the guy is not going to be interested in renting to you. So if he already rented you an apartment, he is interested in renting to you the apartment. But the schiras reshus, lav dafka, is going to be interested in renting to you. So since we want to discourage him, so we still require that before tiltul. Now obviously if the guy is not there, he is not Iser. That's not in the Siman, it's in Shimpei Gimel. Now if he comes as a guest or as and he rents a place to eat, and his purpose is, that's discussed in Shimpei Daled, if he rents permanently, if he rents temporarily, 30 days, more than 30 days, that's about renting. Now, which scenarios could come up that you could think of there's such a shaila? So, for example, you have a chatzar of Yidden or a building of Yidden, and one of the things that are explained, one of the examples that are given, the Knesset Agdela brings the Tashbetz in Chelik Beis Siman Lamed Vav, that if you have a goy which has a bakery in the chatzar of Yidden, and he owns it, he's not renting it, he owns it. So a baker, unless he's on a diet, he's going to be eating what he makes. So he makes bread, he's going to eat bread. He makes cookies, he eats cookies. So he's eating in the chatzar. He has a place and he's eating over there. And we know that ikar diras ha'adam is mekayim ha'achila. So is he oyser or not? Even though he's not sleeping over there, is he oyser or not? So the Tashbetz over there says that if this guy has another place where he eats full meals, the fact that he's sitting in the bakery and just taking and gnashing on it, that's not enough of a reason to make it us. If he has another place, if he has a permanent residence that he lives, and there he eats his normal meals, then he is not oyser. Another example is brought by Poskim. If a guy has a store, or he has somewhat of an office, he has a place where he only works, and he's also the Maram Brisk in Chelik Aleph Siman Kuf Chaf, Nesivos Shabbos Perek Lamed Vav. Say if he has a place, he works there, but he doesn't live there, and he's also not oyser. Huh? Yeah. However, the Kinyan Torah, Shloshos Kinyan Torah, is machmer in all of these, and he says that the fact that this person has an office in this place and he is there a whole day is go after the reason. The whole logic of that we go after eating, if it's mokim dira or not, doesn't apply when the discussion is, are you going to hang around with them and learn from their actions. The Kinyan Torah writes in two places, Chelik Aleph Siman Kuf Tes, Chelik Dalet Siman Mem Aleph, being that the guy is there a whole day, all the waking hours, he's there 9 to 5. If he owns the business, he might be there after 5 o'clock also. Then you're bound to learn from his actions, and therefore, Kinyan Torah says you do have to have schiras reshus in such scenario because of the reason. What that is, he is the only daya which brings it. The majority of the people say that no, if he's not living there or if he's not permanently eating there, you don't have to worry about it. Then that's Seif Aleph and Beis of this Siman. Seif Gimel through Hey. A few exceptions that the Alter Rebbe mentioned, a few exceptions to the rule over there. He says if one has, for example, he says if one Jew has 2 houses and he rents or he lends somebody one of the houses, and we already know if he has tfisas yad, he still has, we know the dinim from before, if he still has tfisas yad, he still has a keli over there that's not going to be removed on Shabbos, whatever the dinim are, then that would cancel the need for an eruv in such a scenario. They still need they still need schiras reshus from the guy. It's not considered one reshus for this purpose. For a simple reason, we can't say that schiras reshus should be we can't say that tfisas yad should be stronger than Eruv, just because. I don't know. Are you talking about the beginning of the Siman? Of the Meikot, they don't need. I don't know why over here. I don't know what specifically the difference over here, because over here it's only mitzat tfisas yad. Not that they're all in the same food. Over here it's only. I think that's the reason is because tfisas yad is less than sharing food. Sharing food or sharing income is much different than tfisas yad. Sif daled is if one was mevatel as reshus to somebody else, and then it became one reshus. It also doesn't help because choishish that he's going to do it every Shabbos, and then this battle teiras Eruv from this chotzer. Every Shabbos is going to be mevatel the chotzer, and the whole idea of Eruv is going to be cancelled, and if they will make Eruv or choishish, people are going to say the Eruv doesn't help over here in this scenario. The other exception that's mentioned is if the goy does not have a drisas regel in the same place where the Jews are, so if there is a way the Jews are passing from each to their own apartment and they're not passing through the mavoi where the goy is, and obviously you don't have to be soicher reshus from the Nachri, because you are passing the stuff from one place to another without having to use that specific area. Obviously, if there is in this chotzer, the only way to pass from one house to another is going through the chotzer, you have to have a schiras reshus. How is schiras reshus done? That Alter Rebbe starts in Seif Vav. The lashon of the Alter Rebbe is if you do a schirus stam, just a schirus, it helps. You don't have to say that it's for the purpose of, because you want to be matir tiltul. You don't have to tell the guy why you're doing it for, and you don't have to write a star. All you have to say is to be soicher. But the Alter Rebbe doesn't say what you have to say. Does it just mean to give him a present and keep your mouth shut? Does it mean to tell him that you're being soicher from him? The Rebbe doesn't discuss it. If you look it doesn't mean that you just tell him nothing. The Chayei Adam in Klal Ayin Hey explains that you have to tell him some words that imply schirus and reshus. Otherwise, it means nothing. Just giving him a present doesn't help anything. And if you rent it for a different purpose, it also doesn't help anything. We know from before, if you rent a house, it doesn't help. If you rent an apartment, it doesn't help anything. The Teres Nesandal says more. If you rent it for the purpose of being mesaken and Eruv, you rent from the goy the reshus to put up the poles and to put up a tzuras HaPesach and whatever it is. Teres Nesandal says it does work because it's connected to the Eruv. The Marsham disagrees. Rather, it has to be clear that you are soicher the reshus, not that you're paying him for a specific purpose. You're soicher the reshus. If you're going to tell him what it's for, you have to tell him what it's for. The Eshel Avram, the Buchacha, brings a story that they once gave that there was a city where they had an Eruv, and there was the governor of town. And the way they did it was they used to give him a present, and they used to be soicher the streets from him. And came a new Moishel, and the Yidden, the Askonim, knew you have to go and give a present. But they forgot to say what it's for. They just gave him a present and they walked out. And the Buchacha says, you can't think of a way to be matir that it works. He says, and even if they would have told him, even if he said, yeah, it's like they do in other places, without specifically saying schiras reshus, it would not help. Because you have to say that you are soicher the reshus from him. How much do you have to pay? To be even less than Shava Pruta for a guy. Because the Alter Rebbe says, because for a guy, even less than Shava Pruta is considered mammon. The Taz, a different place, says because the Nachrim is their Ben Noach Nerag and Poches B'Shava Pruta. Therefore, even less than Shava Pruta works, as opposed to a Yid who's maskir, that for him, we learned in the previous Siman, over here the Alter Rebbe discusses it again, that for a Yid you do need Shava Pruta. But for a guy, you don't need. Huh? Mummer is a whole discussion. If you need, what's the category of a mummer? The question is if it's a unique shor pruta or not. Yeah, it's a whole discussion of Paiskin if a mummer counts, if a mummer is considered like a guy for the price or not. In Seif Ches goes to the discussion: is there isser to do this on Shabbos? It says if you're doing just the schirus, there's no isser on Shabbos, even though schirus is essentially a business transaction where I give money and I receive something. This schirus reshus is not really a real a mekach or memker that's asur on Shabbos, because you're not actually renting the rights to use his property. When you say his reshus, you're not telling him, I'm renting this for the purpose of putting up a basketball hoops in your area. I'm seicher, it's just for the idea is only for tiltal. So be'etzem, it's not something which has much of a value for the guy. So the money that he receives for the schirus is essentially a gift, and he's giving you that permission. So since it's considered like a matan, it's not considered like a mekach or memker, and therefore it is mutter. And then you have the common sense question: how are you able to be seicher reshus from a nachri on Shabbos? Yeah, I can't use cash for it. Cash is muktzah. So look at Mishnah Berurah, if Kot Chav says pretty simply, in the name of the Aliyah Rabbah, in the name of that, just give him something that has value, which you are allowed to carry on Shabbos, whether it's food or something of the sort, and tell him that it's for schirus chatzah. The Aliyah Rabbah brings it in the name of the Ravan, and the Aliyah Rabbah adds another point over here. And this the Mishnah Berurah brings in Sharat Tzion Sifkat and Chav, that the Aliyah Rabbah brings that even if you don't actually give it to him on Shabbos, give him something, because I don't know, maybe he's not going to want to rent out the Reshus for a Baal Sholent, and you could just tell him, I'm renting it from you, the Reshus, and I'll pay you after Shabbos. And the Aliyah Rabbah says that it does work. The Mishnah Berurah in Sharat Tzion says that tzarich iyun l'dina, and even though the Chaya Adam copied the Aliyah Rabbah word for word, it's tzarich iyun l'dina to do such a thing, that to tell him, not even to give him anything, but to tell him, I will pay you for the rental there's going to be. Now, how long Sif Tesgal ever goes into how long does the schirus last for? So the whole so the schirus could be even for a long-term period, as long as the guy doesn't change his mind and retract the schirus, it keeps on going. You're going to see later in the same sif that Alter Rebbe says it's only talking about when he's sacher menu bestam. You didn't give him a specific time frame. So as long as the guy doesn't change his mind, it's not chayzer mischirusei, the schirus stays in place. Now what happens if the guy changes his mind and wants to be chayzer mischirusei? So if he changes his mind before even the first Shabbos started, he has to give back the money. Talking about all bestam. He didn't tell him for how long the schirus hashus is. Some schirus hashus. Now just point out that when we're discussing what schirus hashus from a government for a city, there are places can we say 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. There's places which mentions that the Minhag in Yerushalayim was for 60 years, but and only if the governor would change, they would do it again. But let's go back to it. If it's the first Shabbos and it's bestam, and the guy wants to change his mind, he has to obviously give back whatever money he received for it. Otherwise, he cannot be chayzer for the first Shabbos. And if the Yidden were machzik in this reshus after Shabbos came in, then even if the guy wants to give back the money, it doesn't help anything. But if it's talking about a different Shabbos, then the guy could change his mind. Comes the second Shabbos, the guy could say, I'm changing my mind, I don't want to be schirus reshus. Even if he doesn't give back the money. Why? Because the schirus already worked for one Shabbos. The Mishnah Berurah explains it a little bit differently, but same idea, that basically what it means is the guy is telling you, you paid me, that's right. I had in mind one Shabbos, you got your Shabbos, I'm done, I'm out. You want to rent it again? Different business deal. Doesn't have to give back the money, he could be chayzer. The Alter Rebbe over here points out in the footnote that in such a scenario, it helps, the guy could be chayzer even though they were already previously machzik. The Yidden were soicher, and they were previously already machzik, and one Shabbos passed, they already did a chazakah in the area. But that is not enough to be able to cancel not enough to be able to force the guy not to be chayzer from the schirus. Because Alter Rebbe says, if you're going to say that Shabbos, that chazakah does help for such a scenario, then you're going to have a problem. And the problem is, you're not going to then the whole din that the guy could change his mind by giving back the money falls by the wayside. So being that you can't say that din is set in stone, that the guy could change his mind. Alter Rebbe takes the kav, a guy could change his mind by refunding the money. The machlokes, that's what Alter Rebbe passes. The guy could change his mind by refunding the money. Therefore, if he could change his mind, he's not blocked after one Shabbos. The chazakah helps as long as the money helps. So if he wants to be chayzer after one Shabbos, the chazakah only helps for the first Shabbos. Now, Alter Rebbe continues. Obviously, this only applies if the rental was bestam, like we mentioned before, without specifying a certain amount of time, and therefore he could change his mind during the first Shabbos by refunding the money, or after the first Shabbos, he doesn't even have to refund the money. He could just say, I got it only for this first Shabbos. But if it's chirus for a specific limited time, he can no longer change his mind, unless they're going to go and prorate the amount of money that was left for the chirus and make a cheshbon backwards and say, okay, we gave you a rental fee for 10 years. We gave you $1,000. That's $100 a year. We only got it $100 a year, comes to about $2 a Shabbos. We used it for 10 Shabbosim. That's $20. We gave you $1,000. Give us back $980. Otherwise, he can't be chayzer. Now, what happens if you do? That's his continuous sifyud. If you do rent for a limited amount of time, so obviously, when the time is over, the eruv is over, and you have to go and do a new schirus and a new eruv. And we don't say that the eruv suddenly chazar v'neir. The concept of chazar v'neir applies in eruv when you make an eruv in the chatzar, and based on the fact that there's a door between the two properties. And then the doorway got filled with earth, or there was a storm or something, the whole doorway got blocked. So now you can't carry from one to another. When this is cleared, we say the eruv is chayzer v'neir. The Alter Rebbe says, but over here it doesn't apply. Because over there, when you did the eruv, you did not have in mind that the eruv is going to be limited or this is going to happen. Over here, you had in mind from the first moment, you're renting it only for 10 years. The Mele, you only had in mind the eruv that's only going to last for 10 years. And when the 10 years are up, the eruv is up. The whole eruv, the eruv is cancelled, the schirus is cancelled, the eruv is cancelled. You have to do a new schirus and a new eruv. If you look to one of the first biur halacha of the Mishnah Brura on the beginning of this Siman, Dibra Maschel Tzarich, it's a very long one, and over there the discussion is, do you have to first do the schirus and then the eruv, or you could do the eruv and then the schirus? Discussion in general about this Siman, not specifically about this seif. And he brings a whole group of paiskim in the beginning of this biur halacha, that for them it's mashma, that lachatchila for sure you have to do first the schirus and then the eruv. Even just for a practical reason. You're going to make an eruv and make a bracha, and then the guy's going to change his mind. But even otherwise, the schirus has to come before the eruv. And he brings it, but the evid, there are paiskim which hold that it works even if you do schirus after you do the eruv, but lachatchila for sure you have to do the eruv, the schirus first, and then the eruv. Then he brings the seif over here, in this part of Shulchan Aruch, that when is batel, if you're mevatel, if the time is over, then the eruv is completely batel. Which means, and you have to do schirus again, which means that the eruv is dependent on the schirus, and you have to make sure you have a schirus before you make an eruv. That's why if the schirus is void, then the eruv is also cancelled. Maybe that is a raya that even b'diavad you still have to. It says maybe even b'diavad you still have to make the schirus before the eruv. And he says no, you can't. That's not really enough of a reason, because over there, over here in our case, when you did the eruv, it was al das schirus, and the schirus was al das that is going to be cancelled one day, like we already saw in Alter Rebbe. It was the whole purpose of the schirus was based on the understanding that it's going to be cancelled one day. But when we talk about general schirus, and it's not done with that understanding, so but the evet still we hold that if the eruv was done before the schirus, and then you do the schirus reshus, it should work. And he adds that over here also, in our case, if nisbatel schirus, the schirus is not nisbatel, the schirus was finished, the schirus was over, but the eruv is still kayam. Whatever they used matzah, whatever it was, maybe they didn't do it for 10 years, they did it for 3 months, or for 6 months, and the matzah that they use is still edible, still kayam. And came Shabbos, and they did not know that they have to make a new eruv. They didn't ask it over. They didn't think to ask it over. They forgot that the schirus expired. But the evid it does work. That's the interesting thing that the Mishnah Berurah over here adds one word when he discusses this long bigger halacha. He throws in one little word in the whole when he quotes the halacha in this seif. He says, because it says the lashon is that you have to do schirus and eruv again, right? And he adds the word ulavarich. You're doing a new schirus, you're doing a new eruv, you can make a new bracha. Just to point out, which makes sense. Obviously, if you're making a new eruv, if you're making a new bracha, even though the eruv is still kayam, and even though but the evid it does help, still in all, you have to make a. The Rebbe doesn't discuss it. The Rebbe doesn't say but the evid it works. And the Alter Rebbe doesn't say that you have to make a bracha. According to the Alter Rebbe, for sure you have to make a bracha. It's completely cancelled. But he says that over here, he says that b'diavad it does work if they forget. The Alter Rebbe doesn't mention that specific detail. And then the next seif in the Alter Rebbe Seif Yud Aleph. Now, what happens if you rent it from a guy? In the middle of the time, the guy decides he's moving out. He's renting the house to another guy. So then, the eruv is not cancelled. The schirus is not cancelled. Why? He rented out to the guy of the house. He's a rental is a time. It's as if it didn't leave his house. He still owns the house. His schirus that he rented out to you still works. If it still works, then if he still has the ownership rights in this house, it's as if he never left, and therefore his schirus is not cancelled, and for obviously for a certain amount. It says the Alter Rebbe is talking about his skill Mishnah Berurah and Sifkat Nachoches points out obviously it only applies to his skill because if it's his skill then we say that it takes. And I can understand the Mishnah Berurah takes a different approach over here. I'm just pointing it out now, but. That he says if it was seicher b'stam, l'cha'ira you have to be seicher from the second renter also. What happens if the guy?
According to that, if you rent forever, right?
Yeah.
Not b'stam, rent.
La'olam, yeah.
Then you're good. You can just find one of them, and then one of them will agree to rent for everything, and you're good forever.
Yeah, a guy will rent forever. You have to give for each. You have to make a cheshbon of the money.
Forever.
Still make a cheshbon. What happens if this guy dies, or he sells his property? He's not renting it out to somebody else, to another guy. He sells, or he, and it was for a time period. It wasn't la'olam and it wasn't v'stam. So we say that he's completely lost any rights. Obviously, the guy's dead; he has no rights left in the property. If the guy sold, he also has no rights in the property, and therefore the rental that he gave is cancelled, and you have to go and do it again. Mishnah Berurah in Sifkat Mechavav points out something that, this is only based on those that hold that you could be chayzer in the middle of the time. That's why if it's, even though you rented it out for a specific period of time for 10 years and the person sold the house after 5 years, you could be chayzer, you could change. And therefore, if a new person comes in as a new owner, whether he's a yoresh or whether he's a koine, you have to make a new schirus. But the ones that hold that you can never change, the guy can never be chayzer be'emtza zman, which is not what Alter Rebbe paskins. Those are paskin that you can never be chayzer be'emtza zman. Then the schirus is kayam. If you look in New York law, anybody who ever dealt with buying a house knows that how you buy a house, you buy the tenants with it. And leases continue onto the next. The renter keeps the rights. So if you're going to go based on the malchusa, if a guy rents out to you a chatzer, rents out his reshus in the chatzer, l'mashal, according to law for 10 years, and you paid him for it, there was consideration for it. If you have a shtar, but you don't need a shtar, but if you have a shtar, comes afterwards, the fact that it was afterwards changed to a new owner does not cancel the original agreement of schirus, and whether if it's by yoresh, he has to keep doing it, and therefore it's the schirus kayemes, even the yoresh, even until the end of times. However, if it's until the end of the time, however, if it's bestam, that doesn't apply, because bestam you could just say it was stam for as long as I'm here, I took money from you. But after I'm out, then I'm out. But this is all. But we already said Alter Rebbe holds that you could be chayzer in the middle of the time, and if you could be chayzer in the middle of the time, then the yoresh and the moicher have to rent it out again, or you have to rent it out again from them.
You have to give money though?
You have to give money again, yeah.
No, I'm saying, if you say it was my cousin, then the master has to give back money if he wants to.
Right, but over here he's.
Giving back money.
So go take him to court. What do you want from me? The fact is he's out. The fact is the one who was masculine to you is no longer there. He was not. If the idea is that you could change it in the middle, then that's how the Mishnah Berurah explains. If you could change it in the middle, then you could change it in the middle in that form also. That means that once there's an option of a change in middle happening for whatever reason, for a side reason, then just like it could be for returning of money, it could also be for death, it could also be for sale, it could also be for transfer of property to somebody else. With that, we're going to conclude. Mitzvah Hashem, next year will be on Thursday.